Hello and welcome, my beautiful souls out there, to Cosmic Confluence, the podcast where we dive deep into the cosmic currents of life, exploring spirituality, peace, presence, and even the multidimensional wisdom. I'm your host, Sana, and today I am thrilled to share such a truly juicy and naked conversation with all of you listeners. Joining me today is Marijke McCandless. She's a mindful coach, playfulness instigator, and award winning writer whose work invites all of us to kind of take a skinny dip into the present moment. Her book, Naked in the Now Juicy Practices for Getting Present, is about embracing our true selves, our authentic, naked selves, not literally, shedding the layers of who we think we are, and discovering the joy of that vulnerability. So, today we'll be diving into her book, specifically the practice number 12, which is letting guidance in and consulting ancient divination tools, which is part of the chapter titled Inner Striptease, letting go of who you think you are. And oh, I love that title, listeners, because it's an inner striptease. So, who's ready to get a little metaphorically naked with us? So, let's get started. Marika, welcome to the show. And as always, it is such an honor to have you with us.
Thank you, Sana. I'm delighted to be here.
Okay. So, Marika, first of all, I think our listeners will be a little bit, kind of inquisitive, uh, and triggered to know what exactly is inner striptease. I am, where is it going exactly? So, could you start by sharing what inspired you to frame this, practice of self-discovery and in such a
Okay,
playful way?
so the inner striptease, you know, when I was going through my own sort of introduction to is there something more to life? When things were getting a little rough, my husband and I got into a really um tricky part in our marriage. Infidelity was involved and we weren't sure where to go with it. We ended up deciding, you know what? Let's just spend a little bit more time going deeper together instead of sort of running and hiding and going the traditional routes. And so we ended up going to a traditional therapist, but we also spent a year doing what was called a love and ecstasy training. And in that, we were introduced to the principles of meditation and acceptance and authenticity. And, honestly, that's where we were invited to I wouldn't have thought of it at the time as an inner striptease, but essentially it was peeling back the layers of conditioning that we thought defined who we each were individually, who we were in our relationship. And so many years later, I began to appreciate the playfulness of looking at the spiritual journey as something a little bit juicy. This is not something scary or dry, but a kind of like a striptease. It's a seduction by life, and the
Mm,
way that life seduces us is by peeling back um, all the different identities that we've become attached to, our conditioned ways of thinking, our conditioned ways of responding. So there's all different facets to an inner striptease, but one of them has to do with kind of allowing the wow factor of the universe to come in, the things that make you go, the allow the universe to offer divine winks, allow yourself to become resonant with different ways of getting information. Because ultimately, what we're doing is we're getting in touch with this more essential core within ourselves. We're getting in touch with the source that is common to us all. So, yeah, so that's kind of the basis for the inner striptease is getting beneath our thoughts, our pressures, our desires, our tensions, and seeing what's left. Excuse me while I clear my throat.
Yeah, you can have some water. You can have some water.
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay, so shall we continue?
Yes.
Okay. So, Marika, thank you. Thank you for explaining that. And yeah, I definitely believe, although the literal meaning can be seductive, but, it's definitely a profound way to look at this from a universe perspective as well. Because what I believe is inside us also there's a huge universe, a deep universe, a deep um, uh, interplay of cosmic things going on. So it's like we are inviting life back into our skin.
Exactly. Exactly. And we're getting in touch with what is inherent wisdom. Sometimes it feels like intuition, sometimes it feels like insight. Um, and there's a lot of different ways that you can access this that you just might not have thought about, or maybe the way that you grew up. Like, for instance, I grew up in a kind of a science-based um, household. I love science. I deeply
Mm.
appreciate its ability to kind of reveal more of the universe to us. It's wonderful. Um, and there was a thing that happened where I thought that the way to understand something was by deeply studying all the different facets that other people had discovered about it. And I had cut myself off unintentionally, maybe, from the being in touch with the unknown and the mystery and the unexplained ways that we receive information from the universe that aren't first filtered through the human brain.
Hmm. And now let's talk about your the specific chapter of your book. So the 12th practice, which is letting guidance in, it invites us to consult ancient uh, divination tools. So what exactly are these tools, Marika, and what drew you to incorporate this as a part of the journey into, embrace presence and then cultivate self-awareness?
Well, the two that I specifically talk about in the book are tarot and the I Ching. Um, and both of these have long histories of being used for accessing inner guidance, for accessing inner um, for for using them as symbols to sort of awaken what we might have overlooked or just not seen before in our life. So tarot sometimes is thought of as a way of predicting the future or something like that. I use tarot a little bit differently. I call it Zen tarot. And I actually often use cards that are called the Zen tarot cards. And it's not so much trying to predict your future as trying to get a look at what's inside of you right now. And it works very similar to dreams symbology. So we all dream, and sometimes we remember them and sometimes we don't. But probably many of us have had dreams that are so strange. They're not just like the ordinary stress dreams. They somehow they get your attention in a different way. And we have that sense that there's a message in there, like the particular, like I don't know, I once had this dream. I didn't realize at the time that I was becoming pre-diabetic, but I had this dream where I was being carried away by these orange balloons with black strings on them.
Mhm.
So I could not figure out what this was, and so I just kind of started thinking about orange and black. So in the United States, where I'm from, Orange and black is the symbolism, is the color symbolism that goes with our holiday of Halloween.
Yes.
So Halloween is typically when children go around and collect candies in their bucket. So instantaneously I realized, oh, I have a feeling that I'm being carried away by this addiction to sugar.
Oh, okay.
You know, so it's like it's funny little ways to access our subconscious,
Mhm.
to get our attention in a different way. And the tarot can do that for us too. So I kind of mentioned that I was like had this science background and that my husband and I did this year-long training. So we had never done anything like this before when we started, and this was, 30 years ago almost. And I remember the first we were going to these 10-day retreats, and, they would say something like, "Okay, first thing in the morning, all 40 of you are gonna go to the big temple room, and you're gonna meditate." I mean, I didn't even know what meditating was. So I would just go, "Okay, well, I think I'm just supposed to sit here quietly anyway." Um, but as I sat there in that room
Mhm.
with those people, um, just sitting quietly, doing whatever I thought was meditation at the time, but being in the energy of that whole group of people who were being still and being quiet. I began to have, what I suppose were visions. So I didn't know what a vision was. I'd certainly hadn't had one before, but these
Mm.
pictures came into my mind that I had no understanding about. And, this went on for several days, and finally I got very curious about these pictures that were in my mind, and during a break or something, I mentioned it to a group of practitioners and I described some of these pictures. And one of them, who's a much more adept person in the art, in the spiritual arts than I was at the time, turned to me and she said, "Huh, you're describing tarot cards. You're describing three very specific tarot cards." And I was completely floored. I'd never even seen tarot cards before. How could I come up with tarot card images just without even knowing what they were? So that was one of those moments when I began to question my own understanding of how knowledge is received by me or by anybody, and what the potential was for this kinds of symbolism to reach us different
Mhm.
ways. So well, I'll leave it there for a moment and then we can get more into it.
No, no. No, but when you mention about those little signs, I think what I feel is even to recognize what um, the signs, or maybe through any tool, any kind of message that it is trying to give, it's giving us a hint or a signal in there. We need to kind of have that inner clarity to understand that message. I mean, if you would like to, share your view on this, because
It's a good point. But and what I would encourage your readers to allow for the or your listeners rather, to allow for the possibility is that oftentimes we do have a spontaneous moment of clarity. Um, Even sometimes it doesn't even take so much work. We can just begin to kind of write something out. Or we can also go to people who, are expert in the symbols and ask them to help us. I mean, you can certainly ask for help. Um, the way that I started, once I, um just became floored by this whole idea that these images came to me. I became very curious about tarot in general, and the images that came to me in that two of the cards. One of the cards was the Knight of Swords. So what the image was in my mind was of this knight on a horseback with a raised sword. That's what I saw. And it turns out that's exactly what's depicted on the tarot card, the Knight of Swords. So I did some research on that tarot card. I read, what does this stand for? I didn't have to come up with it all on my own. And it's a card of fearlessness and invincibility. It's a card that also means that we might be charging into sort of a dangerous arena with less regard than we might need, but in a good way. And then the Three of Swords, which was the image that I had, was of this giant heart with three swords piercing it. And indeed, that is what the Three of Swords is. And that card, it turns out, is about abandonment and betrayal and extreme pain. But when it shows up in an actual tarot reading, it means the opportunity to expand and learn and conquer the pain that comes your way. So it really had sort of this sweet underlying message. So I knew nothing about tarot cards when I first started playing with them, but I went out and I got a deck. I actually got the Osho Zen Tarot card deck, and I just began playing with them. And I would read the explanations and the commentaries and the meditation, and I would look at the cards, and I just began to allow them to be like a friend. Why is this showing up right now? How can I find this in my own life? What have I not maybe looked at? What am I afraid of? That's often the kinds of things that will show up in a reading. Um, so I do believe that we have inner clarity and an inner mentor within us that can find that clarity. But as you said, it often doesn't feel that way at the start. So it's really helpful to use something. That's what I love about the tarot cards is they come with kind of guiding commentary. I would caution people to not to not dive super deeply into like, oh, the card is reversed. What does that mean? Just keep it real simple and choose a deck that makes you feel good inside. Choose a deck that's going to make you feel safe to explore maybe some scarier places to look. And that's what the Osho Zen Tarot deck did for me. They're beautiful pictures, and I was willing to listen to what they had to say.
That's where I think the key lies. You were willing to listen.
Yeah.
You were open. And I think that openness is definitely needed. And tied with that openness is that inner striptease or that nakedness within us.
Yeah.
So connecting to that, um, you talk about getting naked in the now as being letting go of who we think we are. So how do all these tools help us navigate that deeper letting go?
Um, Whenever you soften and open, whenever willingness becomes your attitude, you've already opened the door to experiencing yourself as more than sort of the finite identity that you've become accustomed to thinking of yourself as. It doesn't happen all at once. You practice it. You practice being, and that's why it's so fun to do it in the privacy of your own bedroom, with your own set of cards where the only person you have to be vulnerable to is yourself. And being vulnerable with ourself it's really scary at the start, but it's also empowering because you can go right back out there into the world with your suit on and buttoned up and doing your usual way of interacting with people, but inside you can be having these little mini transformations that maybe just aren't ready to show themselves yet. It's like kind of like being a scientist. It's like becoming more and more familiar with the universe within you.
Well, that's beautifully put, Marika. Beautifully put. Okay, so for someone who's never worked with the divination tools before, how would you suggest, how they should start or how they should approach this, even if they're feeling overwhelmed, scared, or maybe skeptical?
Yeah, I mean, I was certainly all those things, but, you know, I think the attitude to adopt is really more one of lighthearted playfulness. It's you don't really have anything to lose. Nobody can take away from you your what you want to believe is your identity. That's yours to decide if it's changed or it's going to change. It's always up to you. You can always put whatever cloak that um, works for you is great. I think the reason that we become willing to turn to things like this is because we are in the midst of suffering and all of our usual methods are no longer working. If it's working, we don't really need to turn anywhere. Life is full. But sometimes we're suffering or we notice that we're suffering and maybe even our deeply held beliefs are no longer bringing us are no longer alleviating that suffering. And we know what suffering feels like. We know when we're in the midst of suffering, and that's when it's so helpful to reach out for help. For me, it's the traditional ways are wonderful places to start. Just, talk to a friend, or maybe you'll be, you know, brave and you'll go to a therapist, or maybe you'll go to a workshop or a retreat or something like that. But sometimes none of those things are available, and you're in the middle of an episode where you're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm actually suffering right now," whatever it is, whatever triggered it. And for me, that's when the tarot cards became like a friend. They became a place where I could just open the door a tiny bit to allow some other way of looking at the situation in. Um, so for me, it really became a solace. Even though
Mhm.
I came from this skeptical background and this scientific background, once I opened the door to the possibility that there might be other ways of getting information, I was curious about it. And it was so playful. It was so, um, scariness was not I mean, sometimes you knew something big was gonna come up and it felt kinda scary, but most of the time it just felt, um, I guess kind of fun, sort of,
Mhm.
just so interesting to see these beautiful cards and to read these mind-blowing meditations of different ways of looking at things. It's always fun to learn something new. When we're learning something new, we are enlivened. So it's think of it just as, oh, maybe you don't like it, maybe it's not for you, and only you can know that. For me, it felt really good.
That is so inspiring, Marika. Oh, great, great. I guess this has been such a different, refreshing yet nourishing perspective on personal growth and knowing us from inside out, ourselves from inside out. And I really feel like, Marika, that we have just begun to explore the really juicy depths. Really
Yes.
get in the now. So, if our listeners would like to connect with you and check out your book, which is Naked in the Now, what's the best way to do that?
Um, your readers are always welcome I mean, your listeners are always welcome to email me or to visit my website. They're working hard to get my website back up. For some reason, it's down today, but it's marijkemccandless.com. So that's McCandless.com, and it's Marijke McCandless at gmail.com. Naked in the Now, Juicy Practices for Getting Present should be available wherever you buy your books. Sana, I just learned 2 days ago that Naked in the Now won the grand prize in the
Oh,
Chanticleer International Book Awards and the Mind and Spirit Book Awards. I was just like, this is very exciting. Um, so I encourage your listeners to pick up a copy of my book and then reach out to me if you have questions.
definitely.
I have lots of offerings on my website too that are free. But yeah, connect with me. Let's get to know each other.
Absolutely. I'll make sure to have all the links in the show notes. And Muraika, thank you. Thank you so much for guiding us through this.
Thank you, Sana. That was wonderful.
And for all of our listeners, I'm encouraging all of you to check out Marika's book, award-winning book, Naked in the Now, and also check out her wonderful resources and gifts. Connect with her. I'll have all the links in the show notes. And until next time, all my beautiful souls out there, stay curious, stay open, and keep exploring and embracing the cosmic confluence within you. Thank you.